All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be doing our 2025 preview and prediction for the Indiana Hoosiers. Look at this coaching staff. Kurt Cignetti's been a baller as a head coach. Look at that beautiful record there. Mike Shanahan, Chandler Whitmer will be the offensive coordinators. Then Bryant Haynes, who's been with Kurt since 2017, is going to remain in that defensive coordinator position. Love this staff here. Pretty solid offseason, 21st in the portal, a top 50 high school class. 11-2 college football playoff appearance, Nick. And the thing is people can sit here and say they didn't play anybody all they want. I do not care because they were playing the same exact opponents back in 2023, and the record was significantly worse. I thought Indiana was a pretty solid team back in 2024, or 23 that is, but the record didn't show it, Nick. So people need to put that to bed. A good football team is going to win those games. A bad team is going to lose those contests. So the results, I think, matter with Indiana winning 11 games, which is monumental for this program in Cignetti's first season.
We see a lot of discourse about the scheduling between the SEC and the Big Ten. Some of the bigger programs in the SEC, Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, were quite upset that Indiana got in the playoff last year, even though they played a weak schedule. I agree. They played a weak schedule, right? There's certainly no hiding that, but I think it's how they played their schedule, and they really did play strong football against the weaker opponents on their schedule. Against FIU, they won 31-7, Western Illinois 77-3. They also played really strong football against Charlotte, 52-14, and then in conference play against the weaker opponents, they also ran up the scores and really had a good showing there and put a lot of style points on the board. 42-13 win at UCLA, a 56-7 win over Nebraska. Was a really impressive win last year. They beat Michigan 20-15, which I think is also a key win. A 66-0 thumping of Purdue to wrap up the season. So yeah, they lost the only tough game they played on their schedule in theory at Ohio State. But they scored in that game. They looked pretty good in that first quarter. They ran up the score basically on everyone else. They beat the hell out of everyone else except Michigan, which was a close game against a good team there that ended up winning a bowl game against Alabama at the end of the day. So I think this conversation, the scheduled discussion, is really kind of an unnecessary point. If this team wins 11 games, they deserve to be in the college football playoff. I really don't think it's a necessary argument. The SEC just sort of, showing a bit of a fool's opinion there by kind of talking about the schedule over and over again. I really don't think that there's a proper solution to it, but I do think Indiana deserved to get in the playoff last year, and they seem to think that this is the right way to do it because they're playing a similarly soft non-conference schedule again this year, although this year, we'll get to the schedule breakdown at the end of the episode, but it's certainly a tougher schedule in terms of conference play. They played two heavy hitters this year instead of just the one in Ohio State, so I think, the whole discourse is kind of childish and, kind of a waste of time. If you win 11 games, you deserve to be in the college football playoff. That's really the point that I'm trying to make here.
Again, if you're a bad team, you'd lose those games. They were not, and they won them. Starting things off with this offense was tremendous. Like you said, they did run up the score on some weaker opponents. Nebraska had a really good defense, though, and like you said, they put 656 on them. This is a legit unit to score the second most points in the country, and I think they're going to be just as good this upcoming season. Rourke departs. Fernando Mendoza arrives from Cal. This guy was a good pocket passer. Nice presence in the pocket. Does a good job leading his pass catchers. Quite accurate passer, especially downfield. I like his mechanics. Really good at throwing on the run. Made some great throws under pressure with the Golden Bears. His best plays came off the RPO play action, one-read plays, so he'll certainly need to develop progression ability. Bit of an oddball release, but it allows him to put some good arc on the ball downfield. 6'5", 225. Great size checks out there. He's got an abundance of wealth, Nick, we'll get to in a moment. Mendoza, though, you've been telling me for a couple of months now, you're very excited for the fit here at Indiana, and I'm buying into it.
I love the fit. I think this is a phenomenal fit. One of the best ads out of the portal. I think the pair between him and Cignetti is just absolutely phenomenal. I think Mendoza is going to hit the ground running, and if this team is going to make the college football playoff, it's going to be because Mendoza elevates his play and plays really strong football for this team. Last year, 3,000 yards passing, 16 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions on a 68% comp rate. Also had 2 rushing touchdowns last year in limited attempts, 100 yards on the ground. I think he showed a lot of improvement year to year. I think the biggest thing was cutting down on turnovers. In 2023, he had 10 interceptions and 10 fumbles. Last year, he had 6 interceptions and 3 fumbles. Didn't lose any of those fumbles as well. He lost 2 of those 10 fumbles from 2023. His ball security got a lot better, and then he nearly doubled his passing yards in the season as well. So just showed a huge step up, and I think he can continue to step up and be really big here. I also was impressed with Mendoza in some of those games against tougher opponents. I look at some of the teams on their schedule that they played where he had really good days. I look at the Auburn game early in the season in a hostile SEC environment, in a close game, a 70% comp rate, 233 yards passing, and 2 touchdowns. Really good numbers there. I thought he was solid against Pitt as well. 73% comp rate, 272, and a touchdown in that game. Really was confident on the road again, another tough environment to play in. Oregon State, really good showing from him. 75% comp rate, 365, and 2 scores in that matchup. I was impressed with him across the board. I think Mendoza fits like a glove in this offense. He's got a lot of weapons to throw to, which is certainly helpful. They even went out and added a piece in the portal of Malachi Jackson I like a lot as well that we'll get to. So I think this is a really solid add. I think it's a great fit, and this will work out really well for this Hoosiers offense.
And I'm learning just now that his brother is actually the backup quarterback here as a true sophomore. That's probably a big reason why they were able to land him in the portal. I did not know that till just now. Looking at those wide receivers, Elijah Surratt should be considered one of the best in college football this year. Big play pass catcher, good strength and yards after catch. He had 4 games of 120-plus yards last season. Omar Cooper, really impressed with his ball skills and focus. Not many receptions, but whenever he caught the ball, he always made a big impact. You alluded to Malachi Jackson. He had a productive career coming over from Appalachian State. 6'1", 200, can play in the slot or out wide. Commanded a lot of targets, had 250-yard games to end 2024. Depth isn't as deep as was last year. Tyler Morris, he went down with an injury after coming over from Michigan early on in the offseason. E.J. Williams hasn't really done much in his career. Charlie Becker, second-year guy with no grabs. They pick up LeBron Bond, a freshman speedster that might get some time in the rotation. The tight end group, Holden Stays, he had one good game a couple years back at Notre Dame, but other than that, he's not been productive in his career really at all. Really impressive pass-catching group overall. I think they have to stay healthy, though, because I don't think depth is as pronounced. That starting trio, I think, is going to be deadly for him once Jackson overtakes EJ for that starting spot.
It's a really good starting trio here, and I really do like what they have early on in this wide receiving core. I think it's a unit that's really solid across the board, and you can really get a lot out of this Indiana passing attack. I'm quite confident in Elijah Surratt, starting it off for this team. He's a really talented player who really showed last year that he has a lot of skills, and he can really do a whole lot for this offense. 957 for him, 18.1 yards per grab, and 8 scores. Really good numbers there. I think he can make a big impact again this year. Omar Cooper was really good for this team as well last year. He's a guy that I think you can certainly count on for this offense for big plays at least. 600 yards receiving, 21.2 yards to grab, and 7 scores. Seem to always find a way to make big impacts when necessary here. E.J. Williams was good for this team as well last year. I think he's a really solid wide receiver Z that can certainly be impactful. He had a couple receiving touchdowns last year in this offense. I really like the add of Malachi Johnson. I think Jackson, that is, from App State. He was really good. 5 receiving touchdowns for him last year. Caught one against JMU at the end of the season in a really good game, 162 yards and 32.4 yards to grab in that game. Also had a touchdown against Clemson in a hostile environment. I think that's a very important thing for him as well. It's 6 foot, 200 pounds. I think he's a really solid depth piece for this offense. I like what this receiving core can do. I think if LeBron Bond can step up and be involved, Charlie Becker as well, this is a really deep unit with a lot of talented pieces here.
Now let's look at the run game. This is a group that I thought played a lot better than the overall production would show. The 37 touchdowns is obviously great. Middle of the pack, 63rd in rush yards per game. But I thought they were very impressive, and their group stays incredibly deep. Pick up Roman Hemby from Maryland. This guy's a home run hitter with great burst, has an extra gear to him, valuable pass catcher. I think he has good vision, nice slashing style of runner. Has shown great ball security. Needs to improve his creativity, though. Not much of a workhorse. Rarely sees more than 15 carries in a game. Kayvon Black wasn't used much last year, but he was a solid runner back in 2023 for James Madison. Landon Beebe had 800-plus yards for UAB last fall. An elusive runner at 220 pounds with some good breakaway speed as well. I think this is a great backfield here. I think the addition of Hemby and Beebe, who were 2 guys who were pretty productive up until this point, being able to get them both in the same class is highly impressive. You saw what they did last year with their 1-2 punch of Ellison and Lawton Nick. Those guys combined for 22 touchdowns. I think you're going to see similar approach this year from the Hoosiers.
I like what this running back room can do. I think, Black's a really solid back for this team. 251 for him and 2 scores on the ground last year, while Martin had, 75 yards on limited touches, but I think he's a key piece that they can find a way to get more out of him this year. I like the 2 portal adds, right? Hemby was really solid for Maryland last year, 6 touchdowns for him, had a receiving touchdown as well, 4.5 yards per carry, 600 yards. He had a really good day against Indiana last year. 117 yards on the ground in that game, his highest total in the season. Also had a touchdown in that game, so maybe they used some of the film from the matchup against themselves to really, sort of scout him. But you are right, limited touches from him, never really more than 15, only had more than 15 touches once, and that was against Rutgers in November, where he had 87 yards and a score in that game. I think adding in another great add from UAB here in Lee Beebe, who's a guy that's a really solid back, 5'1", or 5'10", that is, 220, a guy that's really fast and really can move on the ground. He had a really good day against Rice. I think that was the biggest film that I watched that stood out to me. 2 touchdowns, 161 yards rushing in that one. He get more touches per game, closer to that 15 touches per game mark, so you can certainly get a lot out of him. Had 7 touchdowns last year and 885 on the ground. I really like this running back room. I think it's a really solid unit overall.
Now, the biggest concern is this group was not that great against the tough defenses they played. They're the 3 best defenses in the country. If Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame, they had less than 85 rushing yards in each of those contests. 28 carries for 40 yards against Michigan. That's not great. That's not ideal, and that's the biggest weakness area that they're going to have to improve in coming into this season. I thought overall this was a good offensive line for Indiana, but against those elite opponents, they just were not going to pass the test. Carter Smith, the left tackle, he was one of the best in the country, only allowed 2 sacks in the run game, run blocking. He was pretty efficient, at least when they were going towards his side of the field. Bray Lynch, he's expected to move to left guard as last year's starter Drew Evans returns from an Achilles injury. Lynch had some really impressive games in pass protection, but he also had tremendous issues versus the elite defensive lines. Great portal entry here, Pat Coogan. The Hoosiers get him following a phenomenal season at center for Notre Dame. He really excels in pass protection. Khalil Benson, he was very poor for Indiana back in 2023 at right tackle. Last year, of course, he went to Colorado. Really impressed as he went to right guard. So he returns to Bloomington. Looks like he'll be anchoring down that same position. Right tackle is a bit of a mystery, though, for the Hoosiers. Zen Mikowski comes over from Ohio State. He was very poor for them. Not much options are available to compete with him as the reserves are inexperienced. The best hope would be that Evans comes back as soon as possible, Nick, and you kick Benson back out to right tackle in the event Zen Mikowski struggles. Overall, a good unit, a scheme that gets off the ball fast. These guys will need to be tough and disciplined, though, against the tougher competition to compete. Do you think they have enough here to compete with those guys? Because I think they might, because I like the combination of players they picked up. And Pat Coogan, man, that's a slam dunk.
I think they have enough here, just enough to compete. I love the Coogan ad, right? He coming over from Notre Dame. They have a history of producing really talented offensive line pieces. I think he'll be phenomenal for this team at center. I think Coogan was an incredible ad out of the portal. Really a mind-blowing ad. Khalil Benson coming back. Benson's versatile. You can play him at tackle, play him at guard. He was really good last year at Colorado after struggling previously for IU. Zen Mikowski, this guy is probably a bit of a weaker piece on this offensive line. Was not good at his previous stop in the Big Ten. Maybe he's more of a rotational depth piece. Drew Evans, I think, can be really good at left guard if he's playing up to his full potential coming back from an injury. Bray Lynch was solid in relief last year, and Carter Smith is a really reliable tackle at left tackle. No concerns for me there. I like this unit. They brought in enough pieces to fill up the holes they have from last season's roster. I like what they returned here. If Evans can play up to his full strength and level from pre-injury performances, I think they'll be a really solid offensive line.
Looking at the offensive verdict, the Hoosiers unit has the tools to be dominant once again, as Mendoza is a great fit and has abundance of weapons. But for them to show the same prowess versus tougher opponents, the offensive line will need to be physical, as the run game, again, struggled significantly, and it really caused the pass game to falter as well. I'm going to go ahead and give them an A- unit, though. If the O-line can really come around, and I think they're going to be a lot better than they were last year, they might have something deadly here.
This is an A unit here. This is a great unit. I love what the wide receiver room can do. I think it's a really deep room with Surratt, Cooper, and Jackson, who are all really talented pieces. I love the Mendoza ad. I could really, wax on about that for hours. I think he's a phenomenal fit here. I think he'll continue to elevate his game. The running back room added 2 pieces I think are very key. Plus, they returned 2 pieces that I think can produce. And the offensive line is probably your biggest question mark against some of those tougher teams, but adding Pat Coogan is one of the best portal ads of the cycle, if not the best offensive line portal ad in the cycle, at least certainly with Coogan. I like getting back Bray Lynch as well, and Khalil Benson out of the portal. Again, it was a solid re-add for this offense here. I like what the coaching can do as well. They seem to put together a really solid offense last year that scored, over 40 points per game, a pretty jaw-dropping number, even if they ran the score up against some of the weaker teams. Love this offense, and A offense from me.
Now I move to the defensive side of the ball. This group was also tremendous. I don't think these numbers are all that skewed, though. I know they played some weaker competition, but when they played tougher competition, this defense really checked out, and they never really seemed to get too embarrassed. Added 8 guys in the portal along with 4 returning starters. Defensive end Mekil Kamara, this guy is one of the best in the country. He has a quick first step, great agility, impressive change of direction, matched with a relenting motor, good hands, arm length and size, 6'1", 265. Some of the negatives are, production dipped versus the elite opponents. That's something that's not great. And sorry, I misread my notes. Arm length and size are a bit of a weakness for him, of course, being 6'1". Looking at the rest of this group, though, Stephen Daly was a lone breakout star for Kent State. He was good versus the run, had some sacks, undersized defensive end, but a quality asset here. Mario Landino will back him up. Was a quality player in limited reps last fall. Daniel Dugnuqui, A fellow sophomore will be leaned on for a bigger role as well. Interior defensive line, they've returned Tyreek Tucker. He was a really good run defender in his 300-plus snaps. Only about 6'2", 298 though. Hassa Wheeler, 300-pound player. Coming over from Western Kentucky, saw a lot of snaps. He was a pretty sound tackler versus the whole. I think he can be helpful against the run. Dom Ratcliffe, 285-pound player, was an elite run defender for Texas State. Jamari Monte barely played last season. He's also a bit undersized at only 285. I don't think this is a bad interior D-line, not that much size. They weren't exactly stacked with it last year either, Nick, and this was the top-ranked defensive unit when it comes to playing against the run. I don't think this is a slouch. They only gave up 115 against Ohio State, 69 against Michigan, 193 against Notre Dame, but one of that came on a 99-yard run with a missed assignment the rest of the game. They couldn't run the ball at all with any efficiency. This is an elite run defense, and I expect them to be just as good this season, even though the loss of C.J. West and James Carpenter certainly loom large.
I love what this run defense can do, and I like this defensive line unit as a whole. I think it's a really good unit that's got a lot of key pieces returning while also adding some decent pieces. Kamara returning is a really big return for this team. 47 total tackles, 15 tackles for loss, 10 sacks for him. Really good numbers there. Tyreek Tucker was solid as well. 24 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. While Mario Landino is a true freshman, Landino, that is, as a true freshman, had 9 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss. He was solid in his early reps for this team. Stephen Daly was probably the only player of note on that Kent State team last year, an abysmal team that was really poor, but he was solid last year, right? 51 total tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 6 QB hurries, 3 pass breakups. I think he's a really solid add from Kent State, hoping that he can adjust to the pace of play in the Big Ten. Wheeler was a really good add from Western Kentucky as well. 75 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 2 QB hurries. I love what Signity can do here. He's really good at adding and breaking down talent and bringing in talent out of the portal. Ratcliffe was a solid add as well at nose tackle. Really like what they brought in here. Really like what this defensive line can do. I still think this is a very strong unit, even if it might take a slight dip in production this year.
And back to Kamara real quick. He was elite for him. 15 tackles for loss, 10 sacks, 0 in either of those categories against Michigan, Ohio State, or Notre Dame. Nick, that has to be significantly better if they want to, get to the promised land.
Yeah, that certainly is a cherry pick stat that you have to be better there, right? He was good against the bad teams, bad against the good teams. Got to find a way to put some pressure on those tougher teams on their schedule. Like I said, they play 2 heavy hitters this year in Penn State and Oregon. I'm sorry if I spoiled that for anyone that doesn't know the schedule. Those are 2 tough games, right? Kamara's got to be better in those matchups because of those tougher offensive lines.
Looking in the middle of this defense, Aiden Fisher, he's been under the staff for many years now. Of course, he came over from JMU, led the team in tackles last year, thrived as a run defender. Doesn't move very well in coverage, though. That's one of his big weaknesses. Elijah Hardy played less than 200 snaps, but he was quite impressive versus the run. He posted 5.5 TFL as well. Will step into the starting lineup this season. Isaiah Jones was also pretty impressive in limited reps. Caden Turner enters his 3rd year in the program, but hasn't played that much at all. But I think they're pretty happy with this room, even with the loss of Jalen Walker, who also had came over from James Madison. There's just something about these connections. I think people love playing for Signetti. Bryant Haynes as a defensive coordinator is a rising star, it seems, Nick. Even though they have some younger guys and they also have some players you probably have never heard of, I think this linebacker group is going to be just fine because these guys can coach ball like no other.
People love playing for Signetti, and I don't blame them here. Fisher followed him, and he was really good last year. The top returning tackler, which they get back this year. 118 total tackles, 6 sacks for loss, 1.5 sacks, 4 pass breakups. Certainly needs to improve his coverage, part of the game for him. Really good run defender, though, but a bit of a liability in coverage. Hopefully he can improve that this year. I think he's a really solid player that they bring back at this moment in time. Isaiah Jones, that is, comes back as well. 42 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss for him. He was really solid in reps last year. Elijah Hardy as well was good for this team. 22 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 2 picks, including one that he took for a touchdown. He's a pretty solid athlete overall. That's solid in coverage for this team. I like what this linebacking core can do here. I think it's a solid unit overall.
I move to the secondary. They're going to be headlined by D'Angelo Pons. He was the lead at James Madison. He was just as good this past season in the Big Ten. Great ball skills. He's a stout athlete as well. Jamari Sharp was good in his snaps as the number 3 corner, but mainly played outside there against weaker opponents. Added a couple of transfers in this group. Rylan Gandy wasn't all that good in 3 years at Pittsburgh. Amarian Knighton was a quality player in his time at NIU. Devon Boykin, I love the addition here. Missed all of 2024, but he was a good slot in his 4 years at NC State. Not much ball production. He had 3 interceptions back in 2023, though. Been a big fan of Amari Farrell since he arrived on scene. He was a legit standout at safety. He had 4 picks and was a quality run defender. This guy was a 4-star coming out of the state of Florida. So that made me think this guy's going to be a superstar player nobody else seemed to want, though, and this coaching staff's going to love having him back for 25. Lewis Moore transfers in to start at the other safety spot. Played about 350 snaps at Ole Miss last fall. was a full-time starter here at Indiana back in 2023, so he returns to Bloomington and has proved to be a good run defender in his career. Back to Farrell real quick. Played the most snaps of anyone in the slot, second most at free safety, so it's going to be interesting to see what role he has in 2025, because that's a lot of reps that this guy's playing in a variety of different roles. Do they really need him to do that? Maybe not, but he's such a good player. You want him on the field. I think this is a great secondary, some impressive ball players across the board, and there weren't really much of a concern with them either. Against Ohio State, certainly had some issues, but everybody had issues with the Buckeyes.
Certainly, everyone had issues with Ohio State, and D'Angelo Pon's one of my favorite players in college football. Certainly one of my favorite defensive players. 57 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3 picks, including one he took for a touchdown, and 9 pass breakups. He's really good in coverage. Farrell was really solid for his team as well. 49 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, 4 picks for him in a pass breakup. He was really good for this team. I look at some of the portal ads. They bring back Moore, who was previously here, went to Ole Miss last year. Saw a dip in production at Ole Miss. He was really good in 2023 for Indiana. 82 total tackles for them and 3 interceptions, hoping they can get the 2023 version of him. Speaking of 2023 versions, Devon Boykin was really good in 2023 for NC State. 54 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 3 picks for him. They're hoping they can get similar production out of him. Not a bad ad at all. Jamari Sharp will be solid, I think, at corner for them, although Rylan Gandy could potentially fight for that role, though I don't think he was very impressive at Pittsburgh in his previous stops. I like what the secondary can do here. This is a unit that's got some solid pieces overall. It's definitely a strength on this team. They're really good. They returned some solid starters here. Expecting another big year out of the secondary.
Now, I think these numbers in the secondary are certainly skewed a little bit, because if you look at the list of QBs they played, none of them are really impressive, but they gave up exactly 201 yards to Notre Dame and Ohio State. And then against Nebraska on tape, that was a light show, Nick. They put on a clinic against the Cornhuskers, pretty respectable passing attack. So really, there's only 3 games you can really look at and be impressed by, and against the Buckeyes and Notre Dame, they gave up a lot of efficiency, but against Nebraska, they were ball hawking out there against a young quarterback. So I think the numbers are skewed, but I do think this is still a legit, really good secondary that can compete with anyone in the country.
The numbers are skewed, but this is a really good secondary and still a really good defense. They were top 10 in basically the 4 key stats we have listed. Their weakest stat was 176 pass yards per game, 9th in the nation. Yes, they played a lot of bad teams, a lot of bad quarterbacks, but I think they were really solid against Nebraska. The film certainly shows that. They gave Raiola some headaches in what was a really big win for this Indiana team that really put them, in position to go make a move to try and reach the college football playoff here. I think the secondary is still really strong. I think the stats, sure, they might be skewed, but regardless, they're still impressive, right? 15.6 points per game is still an impressive number. The 80.2 rush yards per game is a very impressive number, number 1 in the nation for a reason here. And the yards per game being below 260 is also quite impressive. Again, the schedule, it's all that sort of stuff plays into this, but this is still a team that is really good. You have to go out and win those games. You have to go out and play strong defense, and they're playing, bad teams at times, but they're still playing very strong, dominant defense and shutting teams down, holding them to low points per game totals. I think this is still a very strong defense. I think they're going to be another strong unit this year.
Yeah, it leads us to the defensive verdict. The Hoosiers' defense was phenomenal last season, and I don't think that was a fluke one bit. That includes the run defense, but for them to remain amongst the best in CFB, a revamped D-line will need to collectively be strong, and the new faces at linebacker will need to progress fast. Kamara is one of the best pass rushers in FBS, while the same thing could be said for Pons at corner, top 10, 15 defense in CFB. Going with a B+ for right now. Could probably bump that up, though, Nick. What is your grading?
I think this is a team that can get an A- on defense, and A, maybe if you want to push a little bit. I'm going to say an A- for now, right? I like what the defensive line can do. I think some of the depth may be a bit of an issue as the season goes on. Linebacking core is really solid, and the secondary's got a lot of good players that know how to play football and really can ball hawk. I think Devon Boykins was a really good ad as well if he can play up to his full health from previous years. And then Stephon Daly was a good ad from Kent State, was, again, the lone bright spot on a really bad team. I like this defense is really good. I think they're going to have similar stats this year. Obviously, they're not going to probably have as good as stats they did last year. Those are kind of a statistical outlier. But overall, I think they'll still be a top 25 unit in the country in terms of a lot of these productive stats.
Now look at the prediction for the Hoosiers. Last year, when I looked at this team, I picked them to win about 6 or 7 games, and I was like, man, I'm really excited for this team. I think they can do some damage with what they have. Of course, I couldn't pull the trigger to pick them to, win 10 games and make the CFP like they did. That's great, though, Nick, because I saw it coming with this team, and the staff over-exceeded expectations, and now they got something really cooking here. I'm just as excited for 2025. I think this is a pretty good team, as Mendoza will prove to be a strong fit with a good supporting cast and a defense on the other side with some phenomenal ball players. Biggest question for this team is, can they come alive in the trenches enough to topple, a big-name opponent? 2 major road trips on the docket will dictate CFP or not. is they'll need to beat at least one of those to have a chance, most likely, Nick. We're not expecting a slip-up in any other game. I think it's reasonable to expect them to potentially lose another conference game. It's a must for them to split Penn State and Oregon. If they can do that, I think they'll be in the CFP, but right now I have them on the outside looking in. But if they go 10-2 and they win one of those games, and of course 11 would put you in there, but I'm thinking maybe 10-2 with a slip-up somewhere and an upset win would put you into the CFP. Right now, though, they're not quite there. I think this is going to be tough for them to get in again. I mean, if there's a catastrophe like it was last year, I think they could certainly slide in. Relatively weak schedule. They got to have to pull an upset somewhere, though, if they want to get back to glory.
I wanted to pull the trigger on getting this team in the college football playoff this year because they burned me last year. I had them at 5-7 last year. I thought they were a really good team, but I just figured that it would be tough to make that first jump early on. They'd struggle against some of those tougher opponents like Nebraska and Washington or Maryland, teams they ended up winning in really comfortable margins in those games. So I was wrong, got that wrong at 5-7. You had them at 6-6, but again, this is a team that we were high on. It was just hard to pull the trigger on some of those wins. I wanted to pick them to win one of those key games against Penn State or Oregon. I think they could potentially, shock Penn State later in the season, maybe Oregon as well. I think 11-1 is certainly in the cards, and if you get 11 wins, I think you have to be in the college football playoff. I still think they get in with 10 wins right now. I have them in right now. I think they're going to have 2 close losses at Penn State and Oregon, and some other things will shuffle their way and get them in. The schedule is pretty easy outside of that. Not even pretty easy. It's very easy outside of that. I like what they can do here. Those road trips, to Maryland, not a very difficult road trip at all, and then the one to Purdue, that's maybe a bit of a trickier one. West Lafayette's a tough place to play. We've seen some top teams topple there in the past, although I just don't think Purdue is very good this year, so I'm not worried about it. I love Cignetti. This is a guy that won everywhere he's been. He was at Indiana University of Pennsylvania and won there. That was a program that was in the dumps there in the Division II level. He went to Elon, a FCS program that was terrible forever, got them the playoffs twice, went to JMU, a program that had a history of winning and continued that, going to 3 straight semifinals in the college football playoffs for the FCS level, went to the national title game in 2019, was really good there, and then jumped up with them to the Sun Belt, and they went 8-3 in his first year, 11-1 in his second year. So this guy's a win. This guy can win all the time. He's a great coach, great culture fit. Everyone loves him up there in Bloomington. He's really putting something together here with an easy schedule and a great quarterback add and Mendoza that I absolutely love, as well as a really strong defense, a great wide receiving room, and a running back room that added 2 key pieces, plus returning 2 key pieces. The sky is the limit for this team. I think they finally have an opportunity here to beat one of these key teams in Penn State and Oregon. They'll get 2 cracks at it. Winning one of those games, you're in the college football playoff as long as you hold serve. A pretty simple script for the Hoosiers this year. Can they get the job done? I'm just not ready to pull the trigger yet. I still think playoffs are in the offing even at 10-2, but if you get to 11, you're guaranteeing yourself in there, and that's certainly where they want to be. They want to return to the college football playoff and get another big shot at the big dance.
Yeah, I think that, at Purdue, reasonable trap game. I know they beat the hell out of them last year. That's a big reason why it's going to be a trap game. The West Lafayette's a pretty crazy place to play. This is a rivalry game. Over the last 10 years, there's been a lot of crazy games in this series. I know nobody knows about them because nobody watches either of these two teams play, especially on a rivalry weekend on a Saturday. But I think Purdue could have something for them potentially. I don't think they're going to be anywhere near as bad as they were last season. So I think it's going to be a trap game, especially if you're trying to eye down the playoffs, Nick. Don't want to get caught up by a rival. It's just college football. It happens all the time. That's going to be it for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.